Election Basi, Senator Ayo Akinyelure, Senator Chukwuka Utazi, Senator Aisha Binani, Senator George Sekibo, Senator Betty Apiapi, Senator Akon Eyakinen, Senator Dino Melaye, Senator Isa Shwaibu Lau. The Senate notes the alarming and growing scourge of rape of vulnerable groups, especially infants and women in our society. This dastardly and wicked act is perpetrated upon children as young as 6 months. The Senate also notes that a report of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, in 2015 revealed that most Nigerian children suffer violent abuses. The report's findings further indicate that for most, the abuse starts before their 50th birthday, and revealed that approximately 6 out of every 10 Nigerian children under the age of 18 years experience some form of physical, emotional, and sexual violence. More especially, 1 in 2 children experience physical violence, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys experience sexual violence, while 1 in 6 girls and 1 in 5 boys experience emotional violence. High-level violence against children is also reported by the National Population Commission and UNICEF. The Senate is aware that since the emergence of this report, incidents of sexual violations and other forms of violence on minors has continued to rise in all states of the Federation, as evidenced by the increasingly worrisome reports of rape, defilement, sexual exploitation, child trafficking, and child labor. The Senate is alarmed that the perpetration of this act is becoming more brazen, as evidenced by harrowing stories of school children being raped by their teachers or supervisors, or by family members. For instance, the shocking rape of a 6-month-old baby in Kano in 2017, the trial of a private school supervisor for raping a 2-year-old, and the heart-rending story of the 13-year-old Ochanya Ogbaje, who died of VVF in October last year after she was repeatedly raped by her guardian and her son, and of course the ongoing case at Koza Church here in Abuja, and a plethora of others. The Senate is worried that authorities have been accused of treating child molesters with levity. For instance, a representative from the Federation of International Women Lawyers, FIDA, lamented that the lackadaisical attitude of government agencies towards the fight against child sexual abuse is alarming, stating that in most states, prisoners, rapists inclusive, get released from prison because of overcrowding. They cited the case of 5-year-old Husseina, whose 50-year-old rapist was released by the court for molesting her 3 days after he molested her. The Senate is further worried that reports have emerged as to the lack of training of security agencies in Nigeria on how to deal with victims of sexual abuse. For instance, the representative of FIDA also cited an example where an 11-year-old was asked carelessly at the police station if she did not enjoy it after all. The Senate regrets that despite the plethora of domestic legislations and international agreements aimed at protecting minors, such as the Criminal Code Act, the Penal Code Act, Trafficking in Persons Prohibition Law Enforcement and Administration Act 2003, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015, the various state criminal laws, and more importantly, the Child Rights Act. The menace of sexual abuse and other forms of violence on children continue to rise unabated. The Senate is disturbed that the Child Rights Act 2003 has been adopted by only 26 states as state laws, while the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015, which prohibits all forms of violence against persons and provides maximum protection and effective remedies for victims and punishment of offenders, has only been adopted by 3 states. The Senate is aware that state and non-state institutions have failed in their duty of care to protect children from sexual abuse and exploitation. The situation calls for tremendous political will and concerted efforts of all and sundry, especially security agencies, to take proactive measures and increase the consciousness of providing safe and very secure spaces for minors. The Senate commends recent strong reactions by the public especially interest groups and NGOs, against perpetrators of all forms of rape and violence. Accordingly, the Senate resolves to 1. Urge the Senate to direct its committees on justice, police affairs, women and social development when constituted to interface with relevant stakeholders in order to strategize on enhancing robust enforcement and implementation of all legislation and policies aimed at protecting minors from rapists and other forms of violence. 2. Direct the committees listed above to review the relevant legislations with a view to providing stiffer penalties against sexual abuse on infants and minors especially. 3. Urge the police and other law enforcement agencies to conduct mandatory training for officers in dealing with cases and young victims of abuse. 4. Urge the judiciary to establish a national sentencing framework for child sexual abuse cases and judicial officers to impose the heaviest penalties permitted by law on perpetrators of all forms of abuses against minors to serve as deterrent. 5. Urge state governments to domesticate and robustly implement the Child Rights Act and the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015 in order to curb the monstrosity of sexual abuse of babies and minors. And finally, urge the general public to continue to act as watchdogs and the voice of the voiceless as a way to curb child sexual abuse and all forms of violent abuse. I so submit.
Senator.
To be intercourse between persons, a woman and a man who agree to do it. But when it is done according to following, without agreement of the two parties, it becomes an abuse, and I am sure our criminal laws have made enough provisions against offenders. I'm also sure this Senate has spoken about this several times, and I've also come with laws. I'm also sure state governments are also domesticating about the law that was passed, even though some states have not done that. So again, is to use this medium to appeal to the various state governments who have not domesticated it in their own domain to do so. Mr. President, my problem is this. When an offense is not adequately punished, it will be repeated as though it is not an offense. For instance, if a man keeps on talking lies on an issue, after a long while, the lie becomes like truth to him, and he will keep on doing it. If a man commits sexual abuse on a 6-month-old baby, it's criminal. That person, I am sure, ought even to be killed, not to be sentenced. To take a 6-month or 1-year-old baby and abuse her sexually is criminal. But it's happening in this country, and perpetrators are not punished. Are there no laws? Don't we have our laws? Don't we have departments of government that are handling these laws, overseeing these laws? So there's a major problem. The problem is sometimes maybe when issues are reported, people take it for granted. Parents, maybe poor people, they cannot push the matter to a higher level, and then the matters will die there. So, Mr. President, first my appeal is this. When an abuse of such nature takes place, those who are affected, if it's a minor, let the parent report the matter to the police. And if they can, write to the Senate. If the police cannot handle it effectively, appropriately, I am sure this Senate, through its Committee of Public Petition and Ethics, will look at it, invite the people, and then direct the appropriate government agencies to look at them properly. But when it is not reported, for instance, a rape took place in 18, 19 years ago, and it is not reported, Now it is reported this year. How do you satisfy that the rape really actually took place? What are the parameters to check whether the rape took place, apart from your word against my word? And I want to also mention, from the trending news in the country, I learned that when a rape takes place, those who are raped should not even be washed. They should go to the clinic and get the appropriate samples and check, because it is difficult to prove it. So we must make standards that when such abuses take place, first we are able to prove it, and then we encourage those who are in charge to give certain disciplines to give to them. I believe in the two predominant religions we have in this country. To abuse a child of 6 months, I believe in Islam, they will not even accept it. If ordinary committing fornication can cause the cut of an hand, that may, I don't know whether you call the neck or something else, but I know that it may be a very big offense. In the Christian law, it's the same thing. So, Mr. President, we should either review our laws and make it even a death penalty. And by the time we kill 1 or 2 persons, those who are raping will control that thing that is making them to rape. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Dino Melaye, Kogi West. I want to appreciate my colleague, Senator Rose, for this very important motion. Mr. President, my colleagues, this issue is not only evil, it's satanic, it's nefarious, it's barbaric, and outrageously wicked. Mr. President, this is one of the satanic manifestations of humanity that have even spread. It is condemnable in the Christendom. It is condemnable in Islam, condemnable even the Voodoos, Judaism, and even Hinduism. Is an evil that if we do not propose stiffer punishments, people will continue to exhibit it and get away with it. Unfortunately, because of the corruption that is endemic in our system, many rape victims get away with it. You report a case of rape to the police, it is treated as if it's a minor offense. There was a case, an NGO I belonged to some years ago investigated, where a 6-year-old child, the daughter of a Megad, was raped by the principal. And when we got to the police station in Kaduna, what the DPO told us was, but is it not just rape? So if an enforcement officer have that kind of mentality about rape, you know definitely there's every likelihood that that person may not be prosecuted or will not receive adequate punishment. I think the National Orientation Agency and other MDAs that are relevant, Ministry of Health, must take very seriously conscientization programs, sensitization programs that have to do with this evil act. Mr. President, lecturers carry out sex for marks. Yes. This is another very serious issue. I want to encourage the mover of this motion to extend, by making sure that the Child Rights Act, all the other relevant laws, proposal for amendment should be made immediately. And I'm sure this Senate, because most of us here are fathers and mothers, will support such an amendment that will propose a stiffer punishment for this barbaric act. Finally, Mr. President, this bestiality is not only from man to woman. We have records. If you go to NAPTIP, there are records now of a man of 40, 50, raping a boy of 4, of 3. It's not only male to female. There is now man to man. There's even woman to woman. It has been reported in some universities and some federal colleges of education and boarding schools. So I think the Senate, as the watchdog of the society, must take this issue very seriously and find a lasting ameliorative and palliative measure that will cure it. I so submit.
Tinubu, representing Lagos Central Senatorial District. I rise to wholeheartedly support this motion raised by a very courageous woman. I said courageous in the sense that the subject of this motion is something very controversial and at the same time very scary for people to stand up and be counted for it. I thank you, Senator Uzoku, for being so courageous this morning. I for one, as a mother, and look around all of us here, if it had been a child of us that has been so violated, we know what we would have done. But we all as parents, I don't think any of us have ever experienced this subject matter. And when we look at the society at large, we have not done anything. It is something secretly I'm so much worried about. What is the way out? Because when we talk about children, Senator Sekibo, I want to also thank you for your position. When we talk about children, these are the most vulnerable group. Do they even understand what they mean by sex? They said even if someone is even taken to a law court, they said victim, okay, be put into a stand to defend yourself. Do they really understand what actually happened? I don't think so. So whoever must have been engaged in acts like this, like Senator Sekibo said, is very, very criminal. And I think it warrants a death sentence at this point in time. It is, what have you really done to this child? Apart from physical damage, I don't know even if someone is raping a 6-year-old, what that would have done to the child's body. When we look at advanced countries, we see how children are being oriented. They're given their orientation from very, very tender age. I remember raising my children in the US. I was open to the fact that I have to teach them how to protect themselves because that is what the society required. They are being taught at very tender ages to say, don't allow anybody to touch you here. If they do, you tell mommy. That is how simple you have to break it down. You will even go to the extent of saying, if your father, if your brother, that is how it is with them over there. I remember teaching my girls that I have 2 wonderful girls. And I remember going through this routine with them because it's very, very sensitive. Most of these acts are done with people living with these children that are closest to them. They are not a stranger breaking into a home to do this. These are relatives, uncles, cousins, and at times brothers, and without even having a knowledge of what is happening. And we know we can go on and on and on how criminal it is. I think this is the high time we stepped in as a Senate to do the right thing to protect everyone in this country. And I want to thank you once again for allowing me to share. There's so much I can share and start talking emotionally. But I know the prayers are answered, but parents too should be given the orientation how to raise their children. Because most people out of poverty will say, I want to go raise money to feed my children. What is the essence of the money you're trying to raise to feed damaged children who would not be useful to you in the future? So I thank you once again for giving me the opportunity, and God bless you, my.
I represent the people of Kwara Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, I thank the mover of this motion and my colleagues that have spoken earlier. Colleagues have spoken on various dimensions of the issues. However, I want to come in under 2 or 3 other dimensions that we need to look at. One is that there was a report of recent about the situation of children in the Northeast who are faced with the insurgencies that are going on there. Part of the challenges there is raping of children by bandits or by those that are insurgents. But the issue, just as raised by some colleagues, is that when even people that are within IDPs are raped and they are reported to security agencies, as it was stated, it's not taken seriously because of culture, maybe because of the culture of people feeling that what happened to such a girl when the girl grew up. But the second aspect is the psychological sufferings that the victims suffers. And I think our system is not robust enough to be able to take care of this, of the psychosocial need of victims of rape. It's not only children, it may be even what we call the teens or adults. And I think in our intervention, we may have to look at what do we have in the system now, either in the law or within the various government agencies that are taking care of such situation. Because it's one thing to be able to take care of the accused or the people that perpetrate this, but the victims also have their life. And without them being cared for, just like the last speaker said, when they become adults, they suffer from that. Mr. President, the other dimension is that we may have to also look at the mental situation in the country. I know later today we may be considering a motion on suicide. Part of the challenges what we should look at is that if we look at the report we see in the papers and social media, you see what we call incidents where parents, or we say a father raping his child. I read a newspaper yesterday, I think in Lagos, they arrested about 4 people, and 2 of them were fathers raping their teen children. Such people, normally, you don't expect a father to be able to do that, or you expect even an uncle. I think we have silent issues of depressions and social challenges within the country. And these are hidden issues because they are not manifesting. So the other dimension I'm talking about is that we may have to look into our mental loss. And part of the interventions I will urge the Senate to look at is for the appropriate committee to look at the mental loss in these countries and mental services that are within the system that will be able to take care of this. Mr. President, finally, I also wish to support the views of my former colleagues that have spoken, that the current laws needs to be reviewed so that the punishment is made more deterrent for people that engage in such. Because when a child, particularly as it was presented by the mover of the motion, as young as 1 year or less than 1 year are raped, it's like killing the child. It's like killing the girl. I think the law must be more severe. That is, the punishment must be more severe to prevent people from conducting this. I support the motion, and I hope our interventions will be able to solve the problem.
Let me also thank all those who have made contributions, very, very valuable contributions. Mr. President, the challenges articulated in that motion, in this motion, very, very apt. We live with these challenges every day. The problems we have, Mr. President, is not so much that we don't have enough laws in our books. Indeed, we have so much. Most of those laws have been well articulated by the speakers in this motion. I think the problem we have is that of enforcement and implementation, not creating new laws, not even strengthening or increasing penalties. It's become very, very clear that even with the penalties we have on the status books today, We're talking about statutory rape to begin with. The punishment for statutory rape is very, very harsh. It's very, very stringent. I don't think ordinarily that ought to deter anybody who commits crimes of this nature, but they've not been deterred. So I think what we should be focusing on today is the area of sentencing guidelines, minimum sentencing guidelines. Maybe our judges have too much discretion in the punishments imposed. Maybe by the time we put a minimum sentencing guidelines that would tie their hands, of course the judges and our colleagues will protest about that because judges always love their discretion. But if we tie their hands with that, that will help. And moving forward, in addition to that, we also need to look at the status regulating the prerogative of mercy. Year in, year out, we have chief judges of states and I believe of the Federal High Court who perform these constitutional functions of visiting the prisons and setting prisoners free, including the governor. Believe me, Mr. President, to some of these judges, when they say minor crimes, they even treat cases of people convicted of rape and in this statutory rape as minor crimes. I think we need to strengthen that area so that their own discretion to recommend and exercise the powers under the prerogative of mercy is also curtailed. Mr. President, I believe if we focus on these areas, in addition to recommendations that have been made by those who spoke in favor of this motion, including the sex offenders register, as mentioned earlier by my colleague, I think we'll come very, very close to solving some of these problems. So once again, I thank the sponsor of this motion, and I thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Senator Chukwuka Utazi.
The orientation of the society is very, very important. How many parents report rapes? How many parents discuss sex with their children at home? These are the issues that are very germane if we want this act of criminality to stop. The moment incident happen in a developed world about rape, the first thing they do after the check by the doctor and confirm that it is true, then the next thing is that they protect the victim. It now becomes the case of the government versus the accuser. Throughout the case, the victim will never appear so that it won't become a stigma to the victim because of society. It happens everywhere. And because at a tender age, they teach them about rape. Even in the developed world, your wife can accuse you of rape the moment she didn't consent. It's the truth. Your wife can accuse you of rape. So you need a consent of even an adult, talk less of a kid or a child. It's very, very important we reorientate, particularly our security people, that the moment there's a report on rape, they should protect the victim. The moment the victim is protected, people will come out to report rape cases and we'll be able to reach the end of it. I so submit, Mr. President. Thank you.
We'll go to the...
I represent Enugu East Senatorial Zone. I'll start by commending Senator Rose Oko for such a wonderful motion, and also all my colleagues that have contributed. I believe the contributions will all help in re-enhancing the role of the Senate as a bullying pulpit on this social malady. For the rape victim, the issues would include stigmatization by society, rejection by spouse, family members, and also victim blaming her for what happened to her. For the law enforcement agencies, the police and other authorities, it is important to have special units that will have counselors and those who are specially trained to question and interview rape victims so they don't end up being further traumatized. For hospital institutions, medical institutions, and universities, it is important to also have rape counselors. And for these victims to receive adequate treatment in terms of prevention of sexually transmitted diseases, prevention of pregnancy, and also the rape kit. The rape kit is important because the rape kit will provide forensic documentation of what happened. Finally, I hope that the Senate, that this motion will not only serve as a bull in pulpit, but also serve as stimuli to initiate review of our rape laws, to bring it up to date with modernity, so that things like rape registry, sexual offenders registry will be established. Thank you.
Senator, the good people of Enugu North, Central District of Enugu State. Mr. President, I rise to thank the beautiful lady by my side, most distinguished Rose Oko, for bringing a very beautiful motion that is eliciting. Oh, Mr. President, I need protection. You know that Rozoko is a beautiful lady. So,
the distinguished Senator Chukwuka Utazi, restrict yourself to the issue under discussion.
Mr. President, this motion that Rozoko brought this morning, very, very important. It's at the heart of everything we stand for as the representatives of our people. Mr. President, the lodge and the kind of reportage you have in the newspapers almost on a daily basis shows something is wrong with the country. The psychiatry and mental health of this nation should be questioned. That's what has just shown. It's a pointer that something is wrong with our people. And we have to go back and start looking at how we handle people. Look at the health of our people. The medical people should look at it, because most of these issues, when you see the committing of this offense, you know, one way or the other, you don't even know that the person is sick. So we have to, and the number one thing is, first of all, to unravel the mental health of the sickness that is predominant everywhere, so that we can start getting at that. Because if you just end up trying to address the issue of the cause, the problem of the effect instead of the cause, we will not be solving this problem. That's number one. The number two is the sex education. It's in a curriculum in the university, in the colleges, primary schools. We have not done much with sex education. Senator Olurebi Tinubu said what obtains in other climes does such obtain in Nigeria here. The answer is no. So we have to make sure that what is available any other part of the world for the protection of the rights of children, the minors, should also be in our system here. We have to put it in our curriculum, sex education, that children from nursery, kindergarten, should be taught what they should be doing if people touch them at the wrong places. And then we follow that. If we do that, we solve our problem. The next issue is the system of report. That's the next issue I want to address. How do you report cases of rape? How many children will have the courage to walk to a police station and say that I want to report that I have been sexually abused? They can't. Even adults find it difficult doing so. So I am of the opinion, looking at this thing holistically, where we are going is amendment of the rape law. We are going to look at it and devise a new way of where people can go and report instead of going to police station. You know, if it's going to be Ministry of Women Affairs, we will take it such a keep a special desk that people can freely go to Women Affairs and report. NAPTIP, or whether it's in NAPTIP or any other place, devise a new area where these people can quietly come without anybody molesting them, and they can give the report. If we can create such atmosphere, I tell you, many people are going to come up and speak up their minds. That's the other issue. Finally, is total amendment. And if we look at this issue, Mr. President, we'll be addressing this issue holistically and solving a problem. Thank you for the opportunity.
Senator Ekoye Yakin is on justice, police affairs, women and social development to interface with the relevant stakeholders in order to strategize on enhancing robust enforcement and implementation of all legislations and policies aimed at protecting minors from rapists. Those in favor of prayer 1 say aye. Those against say nay. Amendment. Amendment, Senator Kona. Senator Olura Meeting. Say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 2. Direct the committees listed in 1 above to review the relevant legislations with a view to providing stiffer penalties against sexual abuse on infants and minors especially. Those in favor of prayer 2 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 3. Urge the police and other law enforcement agencies to conduct mandatory training for officers in dealing with cases and young victims of abuse. Those in favor of prayer 3 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 4. Urge the judiciary to establish a national sentencing framework for child sexual abuse cases and judicial officers to impose the heaviest penalties permitted by law on perpetrators of all forms of abuses against minors to serve as deterrent. Those in favor of prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 5. Urge state governments to domesticate and robustly implement the Child Rights Act and the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act 2015 in order to curb the monstrosity of sexual abuse of babies and minors. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And prayer 6. Urge the general public to continue to act as watchdogs and the voice of the voiceless as a way to curb child sexual abuse and all forms of violent abuse. Those in favor of prayer 6 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Additional prayer. Distinguished colleagues, let me thank everyone who contributed in the debate. And this is a very sensitive part of our life. People have taken advantage of the minors, and in fact, even the older ones. And I think we need a lot of sensitization and protection. Sensitization for those people who may be victims and their relations, and of course, for the society to also live with this fact that this is a criminality that we must never tolerate. I believe that our laws also need to be reviewed, and I think that when we have our committees in position, then such laws can be reviewed to ensure that the laws are more effective and punitive enough to deter people from doing this. Senator Sani Musa, did you raise a point of order?